HOA built a bike path through my pasture. They forgot it was active cattle land. It started with a glossy newsletter in my mailbox. The kind the HOA loves to send out when they about to spend everyone's money. Right there on the front page was a bold announcement about a community-enhancing bike path, designed to promote fitness, family fun, and higher property values. I wouldn't have cared until I saw the map. The bright green line showing the proposed trail didn't run along the street or through the common park area. It cut straight through my fenced pasture, land I've owned for years, land zoned for active agricultural use, land currently occupied by several thousand pounds of very real cattle. At first, I assumed it was a printing mistake. Surely no one would be bold enough to plan a public pathway across private livestock property without even asking. But 2 days later, survey flags appeared along my fence line. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. The HOA board had voted on it during a meeting I never received notice for. According to the president, our self-appointed neighborhood visionary, the pasture was open space that benefits the whole community. She said it like I should feel honored. No permission request, no easement discussion, no compensation offer, just a decision. And somehow, in their minds, my active cattle land had magically become part of their weekend recreation plan. When I went to the next HOA meeting, I didn't go to argue. I went to understand how they thought they could justify this. The HOA president, the self-appointed neighborhood visionary, greeted me with a tight smile in that calm, rehearsed tone people use when they think they're morally superior. Before I could even finish explaining that the pasture was private property, she cut me off. It's for the greater good, she said, folding her hands like she was announcing a charity drive instead of trespassing on agricultural land. According to her, the community had limited green space, and my pasture was underutilized open land. Underutilized. I reminded her there were 12 head of cattle grazing there daily, along with active fencing, feed stations, and water lines. She brushed that aside, claiming the bike path would only take up a small strip, and that cyclists would respect the rural charm. Then came the line that told me everything about how this board operated. Technically, the HOA governs the neighborhood's aesthetic and shared environment. Shared environment. My deed said otherwise. When I asked where they got authorization to enter my property, she mentioned something vague about original development plans and community access considerations. No documents, no signatures, just confidence and assumption. To her, it wasn't about ownership. It was about what she believed the neighborhood deserved. And in her mind, my pasture wasn't a working piece of land. It was just empty space waiting for her improvement project. Opening day arrived with balloons tied to freshly painted wooden posts and a handmade grand opening banner stretched across what used to be my south fence line. The HOA had removed a section of fencing and laid down a narrow gravel strip that cut straight through the pasture. I stood on my porch that morning watching families gather with bikes and helmets. HOA board members posing for photos like they'd just opened a theme park. What they forgot, or ignored, was that the cattle were still exactly where they always are. The first cyclist rolled confidently down the path, smiling, probably imagining a peaceful country ride. About 30 yards in, one of my larger Angus steers lifted his head. 1,200 pounds of muscle doesn't scare easily. But it also doesn't move just because someone rang a bike bell. The rider slowed. The steer didn't. Within seconds, more cattle drifted toward the gravel strip, curious about the sudden movement and noise. A couple of calves trotted across the path, and one cow planted herself squarely in the middle of it like she'd been appointed security. The cheerful atmosphere shifted fast. Parents started shouting. Someone dropped a bike. One woman screamed when a steer snorted and pawed at the ground. Not charging, just being a cow in its own pasture. From my porch, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because reality had just rolled straight into their ribbon-cutting ceremony. And it weighed over half a ton. It didn't take long for the celebration to turn into blame. Within an hour of the chaos, The HOA president was standing at my gate with her phone in her hand, accusing me of endangering residents. She claimed I should have relocated the cattle knowing the bike path was opening. I reminded her, calmly, that the cattle were exactly where they legally belonged, inside my fenced, deeded, agricultural property. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Apparently, she had reported a hazardous livestock situation. The deputy stepped out, looked at the cows, looked at the gravel strip cutting through my pasture, and then asked the most important question. Sir, who owns this land? I walked inside and came back with a folder. Property deed, county zoning map, and the original survey showing the exact boundary lines. The deputy reviewed the documents carefully while HOA board members hovered nearby, whispering nervously. The green highlighted bike path on their flyer meant nothing compared to stamped county records. When the deputy finished, he turned to the HOA president and asked whether they had a signed easement agreement. She started talking about community rights and development intentions, but there was no paperwork to back it up. That's when the mood shifted. Instead of me being questioned, the conversation turned toward unauthorized land alteration and potential liability. Because once police and property lines enter the picture, confidence doesn't matter. Documentation does. And they didn't have any. 2 days later, the county inspector showed up unannounced. Unlike the HOA board, he wasn't interested in vision statements or neighborhood aesthetics. He walked the gravel strip slowly, took photos of the removed fencing, measured the width of the path, and asked one simple question. Was an agricultural land use conversion permit filed for this? There was silence. My pasture isn't decorative land. It is classified as active agricultural property, complete with livestock registration and fencing compliance requirements. Altering it, especially by creating public access, triggers zoning reviews, safety standards, and liability regulations, none of which the HOA had bothered to check. The inspector explained, in plain terms, that introducing public foot and bike traffic into active cattle land creates substantial risk exposure. One injured cyclist, one startled animal, and the lawsuits wouldn't just target me. They target whoever authorized the modification. And since there was no easement, no written consent, and no permit approval, the responsibility pointed directly at the HOA board. By the end of the week, an official notice was posted ordering immediate removal of the bike path and restoration of the fencing. Noncompliance would result in daily fines. The same board members who had posed for photos were now scrambling to hire contractors to undo everything. Gravel was hauled out. Fence posts were reset. The community improvement signs disappeared overnight. In the end, the bike path didn't just cost them money. It cost them credibility. Because in rural land disputes, optimism doesn't override zoning law. If you enjoy crazy HOA drama and real property battles like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the next showdown. Tractor fire.